Hi, and welcome back if you viewed any of the first 4 videos in this series. My name is Tim Spees, and we're exploring the most important journey any human being can take. In fact, it is a journey every person must take if we are to find a clear and meaningful purpose to our life. Last time we took a brief look at principles and beliefs. We established that non-physical things do exist, and that includes principles. Furthermore, we established that there needed to be a sufficient cause for the human capacity to hold beliefs, to hold principles, to be able to reason, to know right from wrong. Finally, we established that some principles are better than others, and so generally speaking, people who hold to better principles are better people. We still need to discover the ultimate standard by which we can judge better, and we will discover that in future videos. Before we do that, however, we need to look a little closer at the popular view or belief that people are nothing more than molecules, that human nature and capacities can all be best explained by merely physical means. So, dear viewer, what do you think about yourself? Do you believe that you have some metaphysical or spiritual, that is non-physical or beyond physical element to who or what you are? It is very popular these days to believe that you are nothing more than atoms, molecules, proteins, and some biochemical energy. In other words, that you are merely and purely a physical being that has no metaphysical component, what people might call a soul or personality. Many people would say, quote, well, if something in close proximity cannot be directly sensed, that is seen, heard, touched, smells, or tasted, then it does not exist. This is what is known as the physicalist view. However, we have some examples even in the physical realm which show that that belief is thoroughly inadequate. For example, X-rays or gamma rays cannot be sensed even while they are passing through our bodies. Yes, there are secondary ways to demonstrate they exist, like hitting a film which leaves an image. But for many years, a person would be laughed at if they claimed that invisible energy or particles were passing through our bodies. My question to you, dear viewer, is do you believe that who and what you are is best explained by merely physical things like molecules, proteins, and cells? That what you perceive and that your ability to reason and to know and to conceptualize and to intuitively know what is right from what is wrong, that those aspects to what you are and what you can reasonably account for by physical things, in essence, molecules and electricity. Is that a reasonable view? If you just want to say, well, I don't believe I have a soul, without investigating or exploring further, then you cannot take this journey. You have a closed mind, a mind that is probably bound by pride or fear, and is thus unwilling to consider anything new that might affect you or how you view your existence or live your life. For those willing to go on, a word of caution before advancing on this topic. The defenders of physicalism will throw complicated vocabulary and concepts at you to defend their belief that the human being can best be accounted for by the mere physical. The simple fact is that truth is simply known. That is truth about human existence and nature. It is not complicated like some physical or biological machines can be. It is not complicated like rocket science, math, or law can be. Rather, it is self-evident, so that even small children can identify the important truths about human nature. The vast majority of people on the earth believe that humans have a spiritual or metaphysical component, and they believe that because it is reasonable to do so. That experience, observation, and deduction leave little doubt that humans are not just a physical being. Let's look at some analogies to show the unreasonableness of the claim that human beings are nothing more than molecules and energy. Think about watching a movie, for example. It would be unreasonable to think, for example, that the film that contains the photos and the machine that projects the image and the screen that shows those images account for the ideas or concepts expressed in the communication of the story in the movie. In other words, the physical things, the film or digital copy, the projector, the screen, etc., cannot account for the audience's understanding the concepts conveyed in the story, like love, for example. Love is a very important metaphysical or non-physical thing that almost all humans acknowledge exists. and that most use reason well enough to acknowledge that it is a non-physical thing. Let's look at another example. The idea that a computer's hardware explains the existence of the software is as unreasonable as saying that the flesh and bone that make up the human body accounts for the person and their personality, thoughts, and expressions of their thoughts. There is a clear delineation between the hardware and its capabilities and the software and its capabilities. One does not just create the hardware of the computer and then the software magically exists and is installed on the computer or the machine. Rather, minds both design the hardware and minds design the software. Once the hardware is complete, the software, including the operating system, is loaded onto the hardware. Please listen carefully to this important truth, dear viewer. The human being is created in essentially the same way, except more marvelous and less well understood. Please let me repeat that. One does not just create the hardware of the computer and then the software magically exists and is installed on the machine. Rather, minds both design the hardware and minds design the software. Once the hardware is complete, the software, including the operating system, is loaded onto the computer. Please listen carefully to this truth again, dear viewer, that the human being is created in essentially the same way, except more marvelous and less well understood. Let's make a clear and important distinction at this point. The human mind, a metaphysical thing, is closely related to, but distinct from, the human brain, a physical thing. In the same way that a wet sponge appears to be one thing, really it is two, the sponge and the water that it holds. In the same way, the brain is physical, or sponge, while the mind is metaphysical, or water. Or to use our computer example, the brain is the CPU, memory, and storage drive, while the mind is the software which uses and accesses those hardware components. Please consider the following to support this view. If a team of the best Nobel Prize winning brain surgeons were to have you on a table in an operating room with all their best technology and instruments examining your brain, they will never know or be able to determine the content of your thoughts. If you thought, for example, of an apple, they would never know that. Oh, they might be able to determine at some point in the future that you are thinking about an apple if they work with a person, an individual person, to map the brain's manifestations of thought, yet the mind chose to think of an apple. To believe that the brain somehow produced an apple thought is as unreasonable as believing that the computer CPU created the data it is processing. No, a human being programmed the computer and provided the content the computer processes. In the same way, the mind provides the thoughts the brain processes. Again, the physical brain is the hardware while the mind is the software. And yes, if you damage the hardware, the software will not be able to function normally, or if you damage the software, the computer's output will be damaged. But make no mistake, a computer works because of both the hardware and the software, just as a human functions normally due to both the hardware, the brain and nervous system, as well as the software, the human soul, that metaphysical aspect of human nature that makes a person who we are. Views contrary of this basic view are unreasonable and generated not by logical thought and reasonable observation, but by a previously held belief the person wishes to retain. To believe that a human's personality, our ability to reason, to know right from wrong, to have emotions associated with certain thoughts or experiences, is accounted for by the physical structure of atoms to molecules to proteins to larger structures or building blocks, is as reasonable as believing the computer's hardware accounts for the software applications, or as reasonable as saying the physical material that makes the theater accounts for the content of the play taking place inside. What about the possibility that an amazing designer designed the physical body that belongs to the human being, and then that same designer places an operating system into the hardware or brain of the person? Is this not the most reasonable view of the nature of human beings? Where did our complicated hardware and software come from otherwise? billions of years of trial and error require a mind to set up the trial and a mind to learn from the error. When have you ever seen a highly organized system arise from less organized components with just the random forces of nature as the cause? Why is the view that human beings have a metaphysical component and that component needs a sufficient cause to exist, in other words, a designer, so difficult to grasp, understand, or acknowledge as true? Is there some deep bias in human nature that automatically defaults to rejecting these simple and self-evident truths? Unfortunately, this is a major dropping off point for many. Many leave the journey at this point upon hearing this simple and self-evident truth that humans have a metaphysical or spiritual component to their nature, and that component needs a sufficient cause to exist. Many people don't want to face the fact that they have a soul or spirit, components to their nature, because reason would lead one to conclude that there must be a first cause or designer behind their spirit, or even further, that perhaps the designer still exists and has certain expectations for the beings it designed. It is a simple truth that some metaphysical things cannot be reasonably excused as false or not real, since by nature metaphysical things are beyond our senses to validate. In other words, our physical senses, seeing, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, are not the tools one would use to validate metaphysical things, like the fact that people have a soul. Rather, using one's mind to reason and using deduction against human behavior, a metaphysical process, is the way to evaluate claims like people have a soul. Using reason, can molecules or physical things account for our ability to know, to reason, to understand, to know right from wrong, to love? The simple truth is that it is unreasonable to maintain that all things about human nature and the human experience can be accounted for by molecules, proteins, and energy. Are you offended by the simple fact that it is unreasonable to believe that a human being is more than just physical molecules? Are you upset that proteins and energy cannot account for your personality and your ability to know and understand non-experience-based facts, like things about parts of the physical universe you will never observe, or to reason how to accomplish a space flight to the moon without ever opening your eyes? That mere molecules and chemical energy both inspired and caused the great musician Beethoven to compose symphonies even after he was deaf and could no longer hear the music. The physicalist beliefs about human nature are at best unreasonable. How about some simpler things in your life? Are you aware of wrong things you have done to others? How do you know that they are wrong? Who wrote your operating system and applications to enable such judgments? Can you identify things in your life, how you treat others, for example, that you can say, that is wrong, or I should not have done that? Will you allow truth to bring you away from pride or fear or selfishness? Will you have the courage to continue the journey? Or will you cling to what you know in order to justify your life or your wrong behaviors? This is a problem we all have to grapple with and overcome. And why would we do that anyway? And what physical thing accounts for a desire to justify things? Is there some justify myself gene sequence that causes this? That would be just as unreasonable as claiming a computer's hard drive caused the software to develop a new feature. Dear viewer, please consider the important facts and truths covered in this brief video. You are free to run out and buy or read a large book written by experts so-called who will seek to contradict or nullify the simple truths presented in this video. But that will be a waste of time and it will not change the facts. If you can use reason and accept what has been covered so far on this journey, you will have made it halfway. And what that means is this: that you agree that you have a soul and a conscience, and that you agree that pride, fear, and selfishness are almost impossible for you to escape on your own. That fear, pride, and selfishness have caused you to behave wrongly towards other people, to have hurt other people, and further, that you have not listened to your conscience in the process of hurting others and taking from others. Lastly, that it is only reasonable that a designer must exist to account for the amazing complexities of biological life, as well as for the metaphysical aspects of our human nature. Nothing exists that does not have a sufficient cause. You have a soul. It needs a sufficient cause. And no, your parents did not design you or bring into existence the metaphysical aspects of your nature. You want to prove that? Well, just go ask them precisely how they designed you or caused your soul to exist, and then evaluate their answers using reason. Please see the last video if you want help with that particular endeavor. In our next video, we will seek to find answers to who designed and created our mind, soul, and conscience, and further, what is the reasonable disposition of our metaphysical components upon our physical or our body's death. Does that which is physical cause the end of existence to that which is metaphysical? Until next time, be real, get past the shallowness and pretentiousness of typical American life, and look deeper to find what you really need.